Assalamualaikum. We are from group number 3 and today we are going to present about Tun Abdul Razak and new economic policy that has been implemented during his administration. These are our group members. The first one is Nur Shazwani binti Imran, Farah Haninah binti Hisham, Nur Alia binti Muhammad Azni, and last but not least, Andrana binti Azian.
Tun Abdul Razak was Malaysia's second Prime Minister and is known for his strong premier leadership. He led the country during a challenging time when unity and economic balance were very important. His leadership focused on improving people's lives and strengthening national unity. One of his major contributions was the new economic policy, or NEP, which aimed to reduce poverty and create more balanced economic growth. Through this policy, Tun Abdul Razak helped shape Malaysia's development and future direction.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Nur Shazwani binti Imran and I will be presenting the background of Tun Abdul Razak bin Hussein, which is Malaysia's second Prime Minister and also known as Bapa Pembangunan or Father of Development. So Tun Abdul Razak was born on the 11th March 1922 in Pulau Keladi, Pekan Pahang, and he was raised with a very strong religious value which shaped his character and his sense of responsibility. So Tun Abdul Razak began his career by joining Malayan civil service in 1950 and later entered politics through UMNO, which he quickly became known for his dedication to the people, especially those in the rural areas. Tun Abdul Razak later became the second Prime Minister on the 22 September 1970s after Malaysia's challenging period of time, which is after the Malaysian riot in 1969. So to address these challenges, Tun Abdul Razak introduced new economic policies in 1971, which aimed to eradicate poverty and reduce economic imbalances between different ethnic groups in the country. Moving on, during his premiership, Tun Abdul Razak focuses on rural development, education, political stabilities, and in 1973 he established Barisan Nasional, a coalition which helped unite Malaysia's political parties and landscapes. So he also made a historical move in foreign relations by establishing diplomatic ties with China in 1974, which actually strengthened Malaysia's presence internationally. Unfortunately, Tun Abdul Razak passed away in on the 14th January 1976 due to leukemia, but his legacy lived on till today. He is remembered not only as a political leader but also as father of development whose policies were envisioned lay a very strong foundation to what Malaysia, a modern Malaysia now looks like. Thank you. Moving on to the next presenter.
The new economic policy, also known as Dasar Ekonomi Baru (DEB), which was introduced in Malaysia in 1971 under the leadership of Tun Abdul Razak Hussein. The new economic policy was introduced after the 13 May 1999 racial riot, which revealed a serious socio-economic inequality among Malaysia's multi-ethnic population. At that time, difference in wealth distribution and economic participation between the ethnic groups that pose a serious threat to national unity and political stability. The NEP was implemented through the Second Malaysia Plan from 1971 to 1975, and it was designed as a long-term development strategy lasting until 1990. Its main aims was not only to promote economic growth but also to ensure that the benefit of development were shared more fairly and across society. Under the Tun Abdul Razak leadership, the NEP became the foundation of Malaysia's economic and social restructuring that shaping the country's development for many years. The new economic policy was guided by two main objectives, both closely linked to the goal of achieving national unity. The first objective of the NEP was to eradicate poverty regardless of risk. When the policy was introduced, many Malaysians, especially those in rural areas, faced a low income, limited access to education, and poor basic infrastructure. The second objective of the NEP was to restructure to eliminate the identification of race with economic function. This division create for the economic inequality and limited social integration. The NEP aims to correct this imbalance by encourage greater participation of all the ethnic group in all sectors of the economy, especially by increasing Bumiputra. In conclusion, the new economic policy reflected Malaysia's commitment to achieving economic justice and social harmony. By focusing on poverty eradication and restructuring society, the NEP aimed to ensure that economic development would benefit the entire nation rather than depend existing ethnic and economic division.
Moving on to the challenges, one of the major challenges during Tun Abdul Razak administration was socio-economic disparities, particularly between the Bumiputras and non-Bumiputras communities. So what does this mean? Socio-economic disparities is a systematic economic inequities between groups in a society. So in a Malaysia context, before the new economic policies existed, the inequality between the communities was very severe. Although Bumiputra was majority of the population, they only own around 2.4% in the corporate equity in 1970. In contrast, the foreigner own around 63% and non-Bumiputras Malaysians own around 33%. So this situation meant that race was closely tied to the economic function of the country. For example, like how Malays was mostly in the rural areas and how non-Malays dominated the urban businesses and commerce. So this is what economics describe as race function trap. So why does this happen? This disparity existed in the first place because of the British colonial economic structure, which divided economic roles along the ethnic lines. Malay remaining in the agriculture, Chinese were involved in trade and mining in the in the urban areas, and Indian mostly worked in plantation. So over time, this actually led to unequal access to wealth, education, modern economic opportunities. So why has this become a very big challenges for Tun Abdul Razak? This is because it actually threatened the national unity, especially after the May 11th riot in 1969, which actually reveals that economic inequality was the key sources of racial tension. Racial tension. As the Malay majority remained economically disadvantaged, there was a serious risk of continued unrest and political instability. So at the same time, Tun Abdul Razak had to improve Bumiputra participation without actually alienating any other communities or discouraging foreign investment, which was a crucial role for the economic growth. So, how to overcome this challenge? To overcome this challenge, Tun Abdul Razak introduced a new economic policies in 1971, like my girlfriend explained earlier. So, what this does, it actually eradicate poverty regardless of race, and it actually restructured the economy to reduce the link between races and economic function. So the key strategies here is by to set 30% Bumiputra equity ownership. And other than that, Tun Abdul Razak also established a trust agency like Mara, which held equity and provided education, training, and business support for Bumiputras. So this gradual approach helped build Bumiputra middle class while also maintaining economic stability. Thank you. Moving on to the next presenter.
One of the main challenges during Tun Abdul Razak's leadership was the problem of high poverty levels. This issue was most serious in rural areas where many people depend on low income agricultural activities such as small scale farming. These jobs provide unstable and low earnings, which made it difficult for families to improve their standard of living. Besides low income, rural communities also lack access to basic amenities. Facilities such as proper roads, clean water, healthcare, and quality education were limited, especially compared to urban areas. Because of this, many rural households remained trapped in poverty and were unable to participate fully in the country's economic development. Poverty during this period was also closely linked to income inequality between rural and urban areas, as well as between ethnic groups. Economic growth before the 1970s was mainly concentrated in urban areas, causing a large gap in income and living standards. The Bumiputra population was particularly affected, which increased social dissatisfaction and posed a risk to national unity. Another challenge was the limited ability of government institutions to address poverty effectively. In the early 1970s, Malaysia lacked accurate data, technical expertise, and strong administrative system to measure poverty levels and identify the most effective proof. This made it difficult to design effective policy during that time. Overall, poverty during Tun Abdul Razak's administration was a complex issue involving economic, social, and structural factors. Addressing this challenge required strong leadership and long-term planning, which later led to the introduction of the new economic policy.
One of the most serious and persistent challenges faced by Tun Abdul Razak during his administration was the continued communist insurgency led by the Communist Party of Malaya, or CPM. Although the emergency officially ended in 1960, communist activities did not disappear. Instead, during the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, the CPM resumed its armed struggle in what historians describe as the Second Emergency. So, during this period, the CPM used violence such as ambushes, assassinations, sabotage of infrastructure, and intimidations of civilians to weaken public's confidence in the government. These actions pose a direct threat to national security and public safety. Ideologically, the communists rejected Malaysia's democratic systems, constitutional monarchy, and capitalist economy because their objective was to overthrow the government and establish a communist state which directly challenged Malaysia's sovereignty and political order. This exigency was especially difficult to control due to geographical and social factors. The CPM relied heavily on jungle warfare, using Malaysia's dense forests as hiding places and supply routes. Rural and plantation areas were often targeted, that increasing fear among civilians and complicating government control. As shown in the map in the slide, communist activities were largely concentrated along the Thai-Malaysian border, particularly in northern states such as Perlis, Kedah, Kelantan, and northern Perak. The porous border allowed communist fighters to move across boundaries, then making civilians and enforcement extremely challenging. The impact of this challenge was significant because national resources had to be diverted towards security that slowing down the development efforts. Political stability remained fragile and public anxiety persisted, especially during a sensitive post-1969 period when racial unity and national confidence were still being rebuilt. So for Tun Abdul Razak, this meant leading the country under constant pressure where maintaining peace, unity and stability was far more difficult. Overall, the communist insurgency was not just a security threat, but a major hardship that affected governance, development, and nation building during Tun Abdul Razak's administration.
Restoring national unity after May 13, 1999, it was a challenge. One of the main challenges faced by Tun Abdul Razak Hussein during his administration from 1970 to 1976 was restoring national unity after the May 13, 1996 racial riot. This incident revealed a serious socio-economic inequalities among the Malaysian multi-ethnic population. Economic opportunities and wealth were unevenly distributed, with many rural communities experiencing poverty while urban areas enjoy a greater development. This imbalance creates social tension and mistrust between the ethnic groups. As a result, economic growth becomes difficult because many development policies risk the worsening ethnic division. Tun Abdul Razak had to manage the economic recovery carefully while to ensure the political stability and social harmony. Therefore, the restoring national unity was not only a social challenge but also a major obstacle to economic development during his administration.
Now that we have presented the challenges, let's move on to the benefits that we gained during the Tun Abdul Razak administration. So, one of the major benefits was infrastructure for all, which means that it ensured the rural area received the basic necessities same as the cities, like the roads, clinic, and the school, which was also achieved through Red Book and the Green Book initiatives. So, what are the Red Book and the Green Book initiative? First, the Red Book was introduced in 1960 during when Tun Abdul Razak was a Minister of Rural Development. So it was a comprehensive rural development plan prepared for every district in Malaysia. So it listed specific projects such as roads, clinics, schools, drainage system, telephone service, and also adult education classes. So this was very important because before independence, many rural areas was isolated, lack of basic facilities, unlike the cities. So the Red Book ensured that development was planned systematically and visible so that rural communities were not left behind. So there were roads connected to villages, to markets, and jobs, and there was clinic, improved healthcare accesses, and school that expanded education opportunities. So as a result, rural Malaysians gained access to the same basic services as the urban population, which was very rare for newly independent country during that time. Secondly, the Green Book. The Green Book was introduced in 1974 during Tun Abdul Razak premiership. It focuses on agriculture and food production. It actually promotes food short-term plantation, livestock rearing, fish farming, and local markets. So this initiative boosted rural income and food security by encouraging productive farming rather than subsistence farming. So farmers could sell marketable product while the country could reduce the reliance on food imports and control inflation. Overall, these policies treated rural development as a nation building. They reduced the rural in urban inequality, improved living standards, and strengthened the economic participation in every region. So that is why infrastructure for all through Red Book and Green Book initiative are considered one of the major benefits of Tun Abdul Razak administration. Thank you. Moving on to the next presenter.
One of the key benefits during Tun Abdul Razak's leadership was improvement of social stability and national unity. In the early 1970s, Malaysia was a multi-ethnic country that had experienced serious social instability, especially after the events of 13 May 1969. At that time, social tension and dissatisfaction were major concerns. Improvements in economic conditions and living standards helped reduce frustration among the people and created a more stable social environment. When basic needs such as income, education, and access to opportunities are met more fairly, society will become more peaceful. During Tun Abdul Razak's administration, efforts to improve socio-economic conditions helped reduce conflicts between communities. This led to a better social relations and a lower risk of unrest, which is important for a diverse country like Malaysia. Increased social stability also supported stronger economic and political development. When society is stable, people are more willingly to participate in economic activities, pursue education, and contribute to community development. As a result, public confidence in government institutions will be increased and the risk of economic disruption caused by social unrest was reduced. Stronger national unity also played an important role in long-term process of nation building. As Malaysia was still a young nation, developing a shared national identity was essential. Improved social harmony will allow people from different backgrounds to see themselves as part of common national goal. Overall, social stability and national unity during Tun Abdul Razak's leadership were major benefits that were supported Malaysia's long-term political and economic growth.
The benefit of the adoption of inclusive and state-led economic planning in response to the challenge of national disunity. A major benefit of Tun Abdul Razak Hussein administration was the adoption of a structured and state-led approach to economic planning. The government played a strong role in coordinating development to ensure that economic growth was inclusive and balanced across the different communities. This approach focused on reducing poverty and narrowing economic gaps that had contributed to social unrest. By prioritizing inclusive development, economic policy became a tool to strengthen the national unity and rebuild public confidence. As a result, Tun Abdul Razak leadership helped to stabilize the country and laid a strong foundation for long-term economic and social development.
During Tun Abdul Razak's administrations, Malaysia experienced a significant transformation in its economic structure, particularly through the rise of local manufacturing. Before the 1970s, Malaysia's economy was heavily dependent on agriculture and raw materials such as rubber and tin. While these sectors were important, they made the country vulnerable to global price fluctuations and limited opportunities for long-term industrial development. Recognizing these challenges, Tun Abdul Razak introduced a new national development strategy that focused on industrialization. So the government began shifting away from an agriculture-based economy towards manufacturing and industrial production. These included the adoption of import substitutions and export-oriented manufacturing, where Malaysia not only produced goods for domestic use but also targeted international markets. One of the most important outcomes of this policy shift was the growth of the electronics manufacturing sector. The government actively encouraged foreign direct investment, especially from multinational electronics companies, by providing incentives such as tax exemptions, the establishment of industrial estates, and improvements in infrastructure such as ports, roads, and utilities. As a result, many electronics manufacturing and assembly plants were established in Malaysia, particularly in Penang, which later became known as an early electronic hub. These factories created large-scale employment opportunities, especially for young workers, while also allowing Malaysians to acquire technical skills, industrial discipline, and also manufacturing experience. Over time, electronics manufacturing became one of Malaysia's major export sectors, that contributing significantly to national income and strengthening the country's trade performance. More importantly, this development reduced Malaysia's dependence on agriculture and laid the foundation for a more stable and diversified economy. So, in conclusion, the rise of local manufacturing under Tun Abdul Razak administrations played a crucial role in transforming Malaysia into a modern, industrial, and export-oriented economy, with the electronic sector becoming one of its strongest pillars. So, to conclude, Tun Abdul Razak Hussein's administrations played a crucial role in shaping Malaysia's long-term socio-economic development during a highly challenging period in the nation's history. His leadership emerged at a time when Malaysia was deeply divided by socio-economic inequality, poverty, political instability, and security threats such as the communist insurgency. These challenges made nation building extremely complex and sensitive. Through strong premier leadership, Tun Abdul Razak responded to these difficulties with inclusive and state-led development strategies, notably through the introduction of the new economic policy. So the NEP addressed poverty and economic imbalance not only as economic issues, but as threats to national unity and political stability. Alongside this, initiatives such as rural development programs, infrastructure expansion, industrialization, and manufacturing growth helped ensure that development benefits were more evenly shared across society. The benefits of his leadership can be seen in improved living standards, stronger social cohesion, increased economic participation, and a more diversified and resilient economy. Most importantly, Tun Abdul Razak demonstrated that economic growth must go hand in hand with social justice and unity. And his leadership laid a strong foundation for modern Malaysia and remains a key example of how inclusive policies and decisive leadership can guide a nation through uncertainty towards sustainable development.